Let me ask you, so you've been doing this homeschooling for a long time and you had no idea what you were doing when you started, which is funny because all of us have no idea what we're doing when we start. But if you were to talk to parents now, having done this for the years that you've done it, what are some things that maybe you would do differently?
Some of the things are, I've had big media outfits ask me, Dr. Ray, what do you want to say to parents? And I'll always remember this. I said to them just last year during the beginning of the government lockdowns, I said, parents need to relax and enjoy their children. And they were sort of flabbergasted. They said, what? You're supposed to be a professor kind of guy with all this fancy research advice. I said, no, but that's a lot of it right there. And what I want to recommend to parents to think about is that, yes, we want to push for academic excellence and we want to push for, critical thinking excellence, and we want to push for historical knowledge excellence and all these great things, At the same time, if you're doing that with your children, mom or dad, and you're not happy and you're grumpy and you have a bad attitude, guess what they're going to think of having been home educated? So that's really important to keep in mind. Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
That's it, and I've talked to my children a lot. They're all grown up, our babies, in their mid-20s, but what they remember a lot is that mom loved learning. She loved teaching them. She was happy about it. She was not necessarily an expert in all fields. She did not necessarily help them become the best in calculus and history and biology and writing, but she enjoyed being with the children. And they remember a lot that when I came home in the evening, we had the traditional kind of setting, and I'd go home, talk with them, discuss articles, say, how does this apply biblically or not? What's in the news and government and our neighbors? And they remember that. That's very, very important.
So I'm hearing you say relationship over academics. That's really what is going to be the long term.
Think about a biblical worldview. What are we trying to do? We're trying to teach children the gospel. We're trying to live it in front of them. We're praying that the Lord will save them. And then we want them to be able, if they are saved, we want them to be able to live that out in a joyful and serious way. And that has a whole lot to do with relationships. Going back to that Gen 2 study, what did I say?
Yep.
Probably the most important factor was that relationship between mom and child or teenager and dad and teenager. It came out loud and clear in that study.
Okay, so you talked about relationship, and I remember when we had our first baby, we were blessed to have a Christian OB, and he took John aside out in the hallway, unbeknownst to me, and said, okay, you have got to take your wife on a date, because if you don't keep your relationship as the most important, you're not going to do Rebecca any good. So what do you say about the marriage relationship when they jump into this homeschooling?
Mm-hmm. You had a wonderful physician.
Yes, we did.
And it's almost exactly what I tell young men who have pursued my daughters, my son. Like, you could do all these great and wonderful things, travel around the world. You could be a missionary, or you could be, the best carpenter. You could be the best rocket scientist. But if your marriage is flailing and failing, then it's kind of like a bunch of hay and stubble, It really is. And also, it's a corollary of that. If mom and dad are happy together, smiling at each other, hugging each other, wow, that has a humongous impact on the children. It builds their confidence, it builds their faith, it builds their trust, it builds their happiness, it builds everything. It's crucial. And I think Betsy and I will talk about that at the speech we give on marriage. It's crucial. I mean, it really is crucial.
So basically, a good marriage also helps you have a good homeschool, then, is what you're
It's totally interrelated. I was kind of an ecologist, I was a tree hugger, but I did not worship trees. It's all very interrelated. You got this n-dimensional fundamental hypervolume, and it's called marriage and family and education and life in your church. It's all interrelated. And when that marriage is really strong, you're honoring Christ and you're respecting and loving each other, it just flows out easily onto the children all the time.
Where do you see the future of homeschooling? And we've had a lot of people jump into homeschooling here in New Mexico because of the pandemic. And it's easy to say, oh, it's all going to be great, great, great. But where are you really seeing the direction with government control and things like that as far as homeschooling?
Mm-hmm. The first thing we see is that, yes, homeschooling, that is parent-led, parent-directed, home-based private education, has exploded. I mean, that's pretty clear. It roughly maybe doubled. Okay. Now, we do not know how many of those will stick with it 2 years from now, but I think it's going to be a noticeable number. Secondly, there are people, even though the homeschool movement, the parental rights and authority movement, really won a lot during the last 25 years, there are some people who still hate parents having the duty and authority over their children's lives. There are professors, there are legislators. So your organization, all the people who start homeschooling have got to fight to keep that duty and responsibility in the parents' hands, number one. Number two, we're going to see an even greater broadening of the variety of people involved in homeschooling. So organizations like y'all and individual homeschoolers need to be loving, kind, friendly, inviting, helpful, not be grumpy and say it's not like the olden days of homeschooling. That's a bad attitude.
Yeah.
If home-based parent-directed education is good for children, and if God likes it, then we want it for more and more people, right?
Exactly.
We need to keep that in mind. And if it's better for them than being institutionalized under the control and authority of the civil government by all kinds of professors who have worldviews radically different from Christianity, then we should be happy for that expansion and variety in home education.